And I'd like to introduce again Danny Tedesco, the director of the Media Family, and the wonderful Tom Needham, who is the host. He's the host of the Sounds of Film on WUSB Radio, and also he's also a founding member of the Long Island Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame, which now has a new home in Stony Brook. If you haven't been there, please try to make a trip. And they're wonderful sponsors of our film and many of our films.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you guys for hanging out in the rain. It's amazing outside right now. It's pissing down. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming out tonight, especially with the weather. And thank you again to the Port Jefferson Documentary Film Series for hosting us.
Yeah.
And also, thanks for mentioning the Long Island Music Hall of Fame, who are co-sponsors tonight. And I hope that everyone can make it out to the Long Island Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame in the near future in Stony Brook Village. Denny, amazing movie.
Thank you.
What a piece of work. I don't know how much people know about your father, we were just talking about. I was wondering if you could give everyone a little background about your life growing up and how that led to your first film, The Wrecking Crew.
Well, for those who don't know anything about The Wrecking Crew is my dad was a studio musician. So he in the I was born in '61. And so in those early days, he was doing all the rock and roll albums in Los Angeles. He was working with the Beach Boys, Sinatra, Janet Dean, Mamas and Papas, Fifth Dimension. Everything that came through LA, these group of studio musicians were involved because the labels wouldn't allow them to use their bands, as we found out here. And so Dad was passing away in '96. He had terminal cancer, and I quickly jumped into making a film about him, thinking it would only take, I knew the beginning, the middle, and the end. Unfortunately, the end was coming, and it was a weird feeling. It was like, I have to tell the story. And Dad passed away in '97, and I tried to get something going in '98, '99, and no one would touch us because I made a nice 14-minute piece, and there were 50 songs in that 14-minute piece. When the film came out, there was 110 songs. So you can imagine the licensing hell that was going to be. And all those years, and there's a lot of people here that helped me and support me through the years with donations, whatever we did, we got the film into the film festivals in '08, '09, and as my wife said in '06, she said, we just made the most expensive documentary, a home film. She said home film ever, because I had no film to show. So we did everything wrong. We did the credit card, we did the refi, we did the credit card, we did the refi, and then '08 came, we got the film out, and then there was no market for this film, and no one would touch us. So then for the next 7 years, I had to do crowdfunding. I had screens like this. We did everything. So when that came out, there was a great success of that film, which allowed me to come to this film, because then my wife, there was no way I was touching a credit card again, as you can imagine. And the banks did, and someone said, who helped you? I said, well, Wells Fargo, American Express, Citibank, they all helped. And then they cut me off. But when these producers came to me for this film idea, I went, oh, that's a great idea. Because, these guys, to me, were the legends I knew, because of the liner notes. So it was like, ooh, and then there was the two things that really connected with me. The story of The Wrecking Crew, my dad never left the studios. That was like, you leave the studios, you're leaving for two reasons. One, you're either getting paid a lot of money to leave and go on the road with someone, or it's not working out right now, and you have to go on the road. And my dad was like, you don't do that because you lose your chair. Someone's going to jump in. So these guys were different. They did go on the road. And it was Peter Rasher, when he says that line to me, he goes, they weren't legends. And he says it because the second before, I had this light bulb go out. It's always going out. So this light bulb went off, and I went, oh my God, they weren't legends, were they? Those were their first albums. Russ Kunkel's first 3 albums, or in 71, he did Sweet Baby James, Tapestry, and Joni Mitchell's Blue. He could have quit at that point. But they weren't legendary guys at that point. They were just beginning, they were friends, and they went on the road to support those albums, as you saw. They could do that because they weren't that busy in the studios at that point, and the business started turning. And then the other thing at the Wrecking Crew, at the end of the Wrecking Crew, I said to Lou Adler, why did you change your sound when you did Tapestry? He goes, no, I didn't change my sound. Carole King brought in, her friends, Danny Kochmar and James Taylor. So all these things were like clicking. I could see this as a perfect jumping off ground. And the other story about the beginning of the film of Wrecking Crew, I said, this is the story of my father and his friends, an extended family called the Wrecking Crew. So it kind of like started coming together. So that was it.
It's amazing with the Wrecking Crew. You really kind of created a new genre. That now there's a bunch of films out there about either session musicians or people who are background singers
some of those. See, the worst was in '96 when I started. There was nothing. Standing in the Shadows came out in '01, and I got oh my God, I had been working on this for 6 years at that point, and I panicked. And my friend who we used to do Discovery films, I used to work in, and he goes, how many Lion films have we done? He goes, there's always another story. So I said, okay. But those films are all done by, patrons, by folks. There was no market for these films. In '09, there was a great article in Variety magazine. At this point, I've already got the film out in festivals. And Variety did an article on music docs and the struggle that these directors are having. They mentioned Scorsese with the Stones doc, Demi with his Neil Young doc, and then Danny Tedesco with my Wrecking Crew doc. I went, yeah, I'm on the same page as these losers. They're struggling, let them struggle. But there was no market. And then Netflix and all these streaming services came out. And people started watching these things. I think it was the greatest. If my film, the same film came out in '98, just after my father passed, it would have been never maybe seen. It would have been gone very quickly. There's no legs to it. But thank God technology changed.
You mentioned something earlier, and I was going to ask you about it because I hear so many music directors talk about how difficult it is. It's really hard to get the rights to songs, and the cost is tremendous, as you mentioned.
And it somewhat should be. And I say that because music, there's a lot. How many musicians, raise your hand out there? All right. You guys should be paid. Songwriters should be paid. That's how I grew up. My father put us through school. We gave, people assume, it's a very interesting thing. No one expects an actor to work for free. But you go to a club, they don't want to pay a cover charge, but they'll pay for the $15 cocktail, And my feeling is, there's a point though, some things don't be stupid, I'm saying this to the label. Any labels out there? Any publishers? Okay, good. No, I can talk. The truth is, they were really good to me. And the Wrecking Crew. The reason I say that, because I think we had struggled for so long and people started out behind it. It was a publisher that came to me in 2010, and she said, you got to change your deal. Meaning I had pre-sold, I pre-made a deal before we got into the festivals, because I didn't want them coming around if we were successful and jacking me up. And she said, you got to change it. I said, why? She goes, you're never going to get this made by what you're promising us. And because I had to raise a lot more money. And she said, send me your new deal. I sent it to her. She made it harder on herself. She says, okay, you got one down. Go get the rest. So the next 3 years, I had to go back to every publisher and label and sign off. They were not the problem in the end. It was economics. You had people believing it's only going to make this much. Why should I invest this much? So that's why it was about economics. Those other films, they didn't have a problem. They had $2 million, $1 million to start with. I didn't have that. So what I'm saying is, But then there's times that labels or a publisher will jack you around. I didn't get jacked around on that.
You must have some kind of skill, though. You must have something that you do that
Skill?
gets the trust of the labels, the artists, and so on.
I think that first one, this story is about every musician, every person that worked in sound, or in that business. You didn't have to be professional. It's their story. I remember someone from one of the big labels walked out one day. She was just an assistant. She goes, "This is why I got into this business." It's their story. It's everybody's story. It's not the guys on the screen so much. And I think after a while, we all got behind it. If that first film was strictly crowdfunded in the end, so no, I'm very proud of it. And then the second film, I think they saw what we did with the first film. And I mean, to be honest with you, there's one song I have to cut out of this right now. Everybody else is signed off, the labels, the publishers, they all came through. Everybody's on most favored nations, and that's the only way you can do a project like this. The one song I have to cut out, which is killing me, is the song Hurt So Bad, the Linda Ronstadt song. Now that's written by Bobby Hart and
Tommy Boyce.
thank you, Bobby Boyce, sorry. Not Tommy Hart, Bobby Boyce. No, Bobby Hart. Boys and Heart, but Bobby.
Tommy Boyce.
Tommy, thank you guys. Thank you for correcting me. I know him too, that's what's worse. So he wants it in, the family wants it in. Nothing to do with Peter or Linda, anything. The publisher, who only has 35% of this publishing, is the one that's said nope. They raised it like $3,000. They're like, I got 80 songs of this. You can't do that. Can you imagine? So I don't know why they're doing that. So I got to take it out unless I guilt them. I'm going to give them a few more months to go, and then we'll really guilt them. But it's really wrong because it's not like they're making that much more or less. But I have to pay everybody that much more, and I can't afford that. So.
There's a technique you use in the film.
Oh.
The bottom.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
There's a technique. There's a technique.
Yeah.
There's a technique you use in the film that I heard you mention in another interview once, where you were watching a Woody Allen film, Broadway Danny Rose, and you use it to great effect in the film, in terms of them telling their stories.
The Broadway Danny Rose scene, and if you guys remember, there are a bunch of managers and agents talking about Danny Rose, who was Woody Allen. And I always loved that, also the Barry Levinson films where people are talking over each other. That's all I grew up with. In an Italian household, everybody's talking over each other, but also in musicians, I never grew up with by the way, I never saw my father play a guitar in the house until the 70s, and I'm born in 61. Because he always went to work. He never played at home. He never came home and just started practicing. He didn't have to do that. So if I ever did go to work, very seldom was in the 70s, but I always saw musicians hang. And it was always about hanging out, and they would just zing each other. That's all they do. And it's, jab. And it's like music in a weird way. So that's how I grew up. So I thought, you know what? Let's put him in the round table, let him go. And that's what I did. With great effect by accident. I didn't know what was going to come out of it. So I love that. And then later, someone said, when we started cutting things, Carol Kay always had her bass with her. And they said, you need more of that. People playing their instruments. Well, Dad's gone, everybody's gone, and Hal, what's he going to do? And I went, hey, just do what Hal did in the studio. Put the headphones on him, let's let him hear the music. And that's how that came about. And so that was the biggest thing I did on this one, because I started with that. Let them hear the music, let's tease the audience with wondering what that is, and let them, then let it mix in.
I love that aspect of the film. One of the things in particular that I love about this movie is that besides some of the legendary artists that are featured here, there's a number of songs, for me personally, from the 70s that are just like personal, like almost like guilty pleasures, I thought. And I could never really figure out why I thought these songs were so amazing. And you featured several of them. I'm thinking about Rich Girl and Lonely Boy and even Short People. And there was something special about them. I know they were just hits, but there was something more to it. And now learning about all the musicians that were on it and what they probably brought to it helps explain why a lot of these songs were more than just simple hits.
Also, what's interesting is you're getting off on it the first night you're watching it. I did the same thing. You know, when they said to me, again, I'm not a music aficionado. I'm not that person that knows that liner note. I know who played on everything. So when they said to me, the band, when we met with the band one day, and it pitched them the idea, they said, great. The next day, they said, Carole King can be interviewed in 3 weeks. And I went, oh shit, I don't know this story. I just lied. Not lied, but you know what I mean? I kind of like pitched them a wide story, but I don't know the details. So now I'm scrambling, buying books on, the Carol's autobiography, and just going through all my liner notes and just listening. And then I had to learn on the spot. And so and then it was Carole King, then Jackson Browne, and James Taylor, and Linda Ronstadt, and Lou Adler, and Phil Collins within like 2 months. It was very quick. There was no gatekeeper on this one. And that's how much love they have them. But those songs, it was like Lonely Boy. I fell in love with Lonely Boy this time. Because and to be honest with you, sometimes some music I wasn't into. And I was like, oh man, I love this song, even though I started listening to it again. And I hear solos more, I hear guitar players and solos more than lyrics, which is odd that I'm doing this film, a singer-songwriter. But no, I do I hear all the solos much more.
It's amazing that you were able to kind of just jump in there, the pressure to really be knowledgeable about each artist and their relationships with the musicians.
I think, if you let them talk, they'll tell you. There's Carole. To be honest with you, the Carole. It's funny because I don't think I've ever said this in an interview yet. The Carole King interview was the toughest. It was the first one up, and she wanted to be with Danny, which I'm fine with. But when, you let Carole tell this story, and then I try to I try to, because as a filmmaker or someone doing an interview, you also are listening, you're trying to get an in and an out. Because if you're rambling, I got nowhere to go to get us out of this scene, no matter how many cameras I got. So I'm trying to get a pause in there, and so I try to break it up to change, and she goes, hold on. I was like, oh God, I just got don't excuse my language, but bitch slapped by Carole King. And it was like, okay, and I just became the little boy again. But she was amazing, because that album is so iconic. The thing that saved us in a weird way, I hate to say it, was COVID in a weird way, because at that point when COVID hit, and when we all closed down March 11th, whatever it was, I didn't have any of the guys in this film. Only a couple of those playing parts where they played their parts, but that was it. I didn't have them, I didn't have Keith Richards, I didn't have Don Henley. Neil Young, you could see, is a total Zoom interview, by the way. And no matter how bad it looks, it's Neil Young, you just put it in. Hilarious. But that changed my direction in terms of what we're going to see in this film. Because at one point I wanted to call it Immediate Family and Friends, and talk about like Jim Keltner, the other drummers, Jeff Porcaro, and all these other players. And I couldn't do that because I couldn't get out anymore. Now I had to go back and get these guys in the can. And we slowly went out with just myself, a soundman, and a camera person. And that's how we did it. And we just played safe and got it in the can. And then Stevie Nicks agreed to do it by Zoom, and Steve Jordan and Neil Young. Those were, I think, the only three. And Keith Richards sent his in. So that was it. Other than that, everybody else was in person.
Did you always know that you wanted a live performance? I saw you had the local Iridium in there, which was amazing.
That came in the October, just a couple months after we started. And I found out they were going. I said, why aren't we going? It was like to the producers. I said, we got to go. And they didn't see. I think they didn't understand. But I said, no, I don't know what's going to come out. That's the other thing. There is no script when you make a documentary like this. You have no idea what's going to come up. And I said, we have to go. We have to shoot footage and we have to shoot B-roll. Whether or not we use their concert inside the place, it doesn't matter. I need to go and you get them. I mean, they're hilarious, these guys. You know, they don't always want to be mic'd, by the way. You know, that's like something I really beg everybody to do when we're in that situation. Please be mic'd so we can be a fly on the wall. And sometimes, you know, they say things that they don't want you to hear. And I said, don't worry, I'm not going to pull in, and don't worry about it.
Were there any ground rules in terms of what you could film?
No. There's no ground rules. I mean, I would if they wanted to say something, or say, no. No, they were really giving these guys. The greatest joy was showing the film, because we showed the film last, I think, August or July, to the guys and to Jackson Brown. You know, it was small, like 10 of them, 10 guys, you know, 10 of us in this room because of COVID again. And they were tears in their eyes because they had never been in they've been in hundreds of documentaries, but never someone talking about them. So it was like a really sweet moment for me. And then Jackson said, wow, he goes, I've known these guys over 50 years. I didn't know some of this stuff. So that was when you nail it, you feel, okay, we got it.
The one thing I didn't expect was how sentimental the film was. You really sense that they are deeply
you can't
moved by telling their story.
You can't fake it. You know, as much as they call themselves a media family, you can't fake it. I mean, they just give it. And, you know, I always say about these two documentaries, it's not so much about the music. It really, yes, it's great to hear all the songs, but if there's nothing, if there's no heart coming out of them, forget it. We got nothing other than a jukebox playing songs.
What do you feel that you brought to the film? I mean, there's so much music, they have their own story, but this is your story too.
I think, well, it's funny because the first story, The Wrecking Crew, and those who've seen it, when I cut 20 minutes of it, one of the editors said, an editor / director friend said, why are you cutting it like this? He says, and I said, well, and he goes, no. Why aren't you why aren't you involving yourself in this film, The Wrecking Crew? I said, I don't want to. And he goes, but you have to, because any one of us could do what you're doing right now. You have something that none of us have, which is your father is part of this story, and you're not jumping. And the truth was, I didn't want to be part of it because I was scared. If I'm part of it, that means I'm not a director. That was really what my true feeling was, is my ego was saying, don't do it, don't do it. And I realized it was a better story if I participated just at the beginning, for those who haven't seen it. And so what came out of this, so being able to do this, the trust that these guys have in me is because of that film. Musicians, you know, they love the film, whatever, it's their story, so they trusted me to tell this story. One of them, Steve Pistel, said he thinks the fact that I'm not a musician is probably an asset to me, because I'm not asking him these technical questions. I don't know shit about chord structure, as many of my friends will tell you. I want to know the third chord, as I've told you many times. But it's not about that. It's about, hey, how did you grow up? You know, I know the story on my side as son of a musician. And I know I watch my friends struggle as musicians. So I see the highs and lows of the business, so that's why I find it more interesting.
It's educational to all of us to see how they did what they did, not just in terms of their technical skills, but to learn that part of what they had to be able to do was to be social with these major artists and keep relationships. And what's the most, like, I don't know, like the most important thing that you learned that that helps to explain why they were as successful as they were at what they were doing for so long?
You know, it's no different than any business. You can't be a jerk. You know, you got to be supportive of each other. And I find musicians to be actually, I know some might differ from me, but I really believe musicians they're talking in language to each other. You guys are all talking a different language that we don't understand. So it's a social thing, and if you're a jerk, no one wants to play with you, no matter how great you are. You could be Beethoven, but you're not going to hang out with them. And so I think that's part of the skill, and that's what I learned from growing up. My father was a great guitar player. He'd say he's a good guitar player, but he was amazing. He could read a room. I mean, like no one could. And I think that was the greatest asset. He was giving. And the stories I hear about him were always about how giving he was. And that's what I love about these musicians. These musicians, Leland Sklar is one of the greatest, nicest guys out there. He's still, and same with Russ and these guys, and they're so giving to each other. So I think that's what it comes down to is, that kindness.
And what was the most rewarding aspect of making this film for you?
I think seeing it with an audience. It's always seeing it with an audience. By the way, we're not distributed yet. So as I might have mentioned earlier, it's really important. Someone says, you don't have distribution? No, we don't. Until we show them, the distributors, that, hey, we won these audience awards or this, or we got this amount of analytics on our Facebook page, or that's what I have to keep stressing. If you guys go to our, it's immediatefamilyfilm.com, just sign up. I won't inundate you with, I promise you, I haven't sent anything out in 2 months. You'll see the outtakes. But also I could show a distributor, hey, we got 5,000 followers right now. It means a lot. If you go to immediatefamily.com, you'll get a marriage therapist or a family therapist. So either way, you're going to win. But it's really important to stress about that. But that's the best part. Is really the other day we showed it in Boulder, and for the film festival, opened up in Boulder. It was like blown away. 880 people, and it was Russ and I and Steve, and it was like, wow. I mean, that is the coolest thing. And then I seen Russ get excited in texting all the guys who weren't there. He goes, as much as you hear about the music, he said how the music changed everybody's lives, and they tell him that. He goes, now he's realizing that with the film, because he's seeing audiences react to the stories, and that's a cool thing. So I'm lucky.
That's awesome, and you did a fantastic job. And I think people in the audience want to ask you some questions too, so we're going to open it up. Just raise your hand if you're interested in asking a question.
There's one.
How many albums did the section plan?
How many albums did the section plan?
So how many albums did they make?
Oh.
They did solo album.
Oh, the section themselves. I mean, they only made 3 albums, but I don't know how many, I don't know how many they've sold. Oh, here you go. Here's a microphone.
My question was how many they make?
3.
3, okay, thanks.
Good, I nailed that.
And they're probably still available, right?
Used.
Okay.
I got 3. Oh.
Question?
Thank you so much for this labor of love.
Thank you.
I was really, really taken by the amount of heart that exudes from this film.
Thank you.
Very impressed by that and wasn't expecting it. My question is about the animation. What was the inspiration? How did that become part of the film?
I needed to tell the story. I wanted to use animation because I felt this is a perfect time to do it. And I also wanted it to be light, humored, because, that's a chance for me to break away from some, if it's serious, I don't want to do it, But I want it to also be like Peanuts, very simple. And also like to always have a piece of reality in the shot, and then the animation. So like when we do, and it's also inside for the musicians sometimes. Like Leland, when he's at Western Studios, when he's got the coming down out of the sky and it's thundering and all that, and that's his real car. It was his real car. He sold it. So the thing's coming down, the bass comes down. The reason I did Frankenstein is he calls that bass Frankenstein. So bass players around the world know that bass is Frankenstein, so it's kind of like inside. The animators I found from a friend of mine, they did a little short on him, and they're from Minneapolis but live in New York City. So yeah, that's been the best part for me. It's fun to do that. I can't draw, by the way. I can't draw, I can't play.
Any other question?
Is
Oh,
one-
sorry.
Yeah, I'm one of those music nerds that you were talking about. And I was just curious because when I think of these guys, I also think of the keyboard player that got mentioned, Craig Durkee.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering,
I
did he
wanted-
not want to participate?
No, not at all. No, Craig, unfortunately, Craig Durkee's the one in the section. Craig, unfortunately, his wife was passing away during all that. So I could never get to Craig, and it was hard. And then COVID hit again. So it was just too dangerous. So, but I'm glad we got, at least got him in there, talking about him. So.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment on when you were talking about how you would have loved to have had Gad and sort of end Friends.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that I'm so glad you didn't.
Yeah.
I think
I would have hurt someone's feelings, to be honest with you.
what you've created is a more personal. I think you could go on forever with a lot of these people, and this strikes a chord without a doubt in my mind.
No pun intended.
Yeah, for me it did. It was. I just loved knowing these guys, and even if you're not a musician and you don't know them, after this film you know them, and it is a family, and it's an immediate family.
Yeah.
I think you really kept it. I think it's just superb.
Thank you. It's funny because that made it easier. COVID made that easier for me. That made my decision. I used it kind of an excuse, but it also focused me. When you're starting off with a documentary, there was talks. We did a whole section on the music business in terms of there's the records. LPs changed the business. FM radio changed the business. Those two things created this monster in a weird way. That time period. As much as the 45s and AM radio did it for the Wrecking Crew, all that I filmed it, talked about it, but you got to get rid of it.
It's wonderful.
So thank you.
Danny, this really is incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
What's incredible is that you have captured with the Wrecking Crew and now with the immediate family, you've captured the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, you have put together the informative information that is behind the scenes of what has given us the joy of this great music.
Thank you.
This effort that you have done is Herculean at what you've done. Really, you deserve.
Thank you.
What's incredible is I had the chance of knowing your dad and playing with your dad. What do you think your dad would have said about the Wrecking Crew movie and what he would have said now about the next generation of the immediate family?
I was thinking about this earlier. Something you said earlier when we were talking. Dad never saw any of the Wrecking Crew footage, never, because it's weird because I went to go, even to the point where I was shooting film at the time, which was very difficult. We were shooting 16 millimeter in those days, and Dad got sick very quickly, so when I did go film him, he was too weak to really, that energy was gone. And then Dad passes, so I never had anything, again, for another 10 years to be seen. He would have been blown away. I know he would have. My mom went to how many screenings over the years? She's passed now, but that Wrecking Crew, every time there was a screening, she would go. Every time she would cry. And it was like amazing, and I realized, because it's part of her story, but I know it would have been, my dad would have been a basket case as well. He loved his friend. The first time I showed 20 minutes to Hal at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I didn't show him. We were going just to show a short 20 minutes, just a making of, whatever. and the audience just cheered when he came down, and the first time he's seen this. And he gets up stage just like this, and the moderator starts talking to him for a question, and he burst out in tears. And I thought he was kidding, as you remembered, Tom. He was such a jokester, but those were the real tears behind those big glasses.
Yeah.
And it was because he saw his life flash in front of him, all his friends that are gone. And I think that's what happens when you see your life in front of you and see so much you missed. I wish my dad was around also, obviously, for many reasons, but I wish I could ask him about these guys.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he didn't know any of the other three. They had never worked with my dad except for Leland. He's the only one that worked with him because Leland could do those Mike Post jobs, all those, features or TV scores. The other guys that's not different animal. Leland could do that. I would have loved to know what these guys were like or what Leland was like. There's so many questions. And I tell everybody, I tell the kids when I'm doing these things at schools and stuff, go interview your grandparents, interview your parents, interview everybody you know. I don't care if don't make a documentary, you don't have to. Just record it. Because ask them questions you would never think, because you know what? It's the only way we're capturing the past. Tomorrow's past. Quote me. Oh, that's a good one.
But you really have captured.
No, but I'm serious about that because it's really important. I would love to ask those questions. I can't.
And you captured it, but what's amazing is that the purposeful efforts of your life is extremely at an important stage right now because you captured this, but there's more for you to be doing.
Yeah.
There's more with Steve Gadd's stuff. There's another movie inside of you, a documentary that could be done with that can capture.
I would love, that's the hard one. It's funny because that New York thing, man, I would, with the Richard T. and the Eric Gales and all those guys, I would love that.
I'll talk to Gadd and we'll make that happen for sure. But
the next one I've already started is Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman Jack, there it is, fantastic. Danny, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Tom. Is there another question? The last question?
Oh, guys, before just as you leave, just do me a favor. Seriously, about if you do Instagram, it's Immediate Family Film at Instagram or Facebook. Trivia, we always do trivia and send out highlights and stuff. And if it's, like I said, it's really important. If there's 80 or 100 people here, if you told 10 people, my God, that's 1,000 people that know about the film. So please do that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks again, Danny, Tom.
Thank you,
Another great
Wendy, and thank
interview.
you, Port Jefferson. Thank you so much. I got it right. I almost went to the wrong port. Thank you, Port Jefferson.
Everybody, please stay home. Drive carefully. I know it's not great out there.
Thank you.
Therapy or what?